Welcome to today's lesson on rounding decimals. Today, I'm going to teach you how to round to a specific place value. Let's go ahead and get started. We are going to begin today using the chart on the screen. Now, when we're rounding decimals, it's very important that you understand place value. As you can see, we have our decimal separating our three wholes from our decimal value to the right. All of the numbers to the left of a decimal represent whole numbers. All of the numbers to the right of a decimal represent part of a whole. So we have our ones place, which is our whole number, our decimal, and then our parts of a whole, or our decimal values, are tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. So let's go ahead and let's start looking at how we can round decimals. When you're rounding decimal, you're going to be asked to round to a specific place value. In this case, we are going to round to the hundredths place. Your first step is to underline the place value that you are rounding to. Since we're rounding to the hundredths place, I underlined hundredths. Next, you need to look at the number directly to the right of the place value you are rounding to. So I need to look at my thousandths place. If this number is 5 or greater, then you are going to round your hundredths place, or your underlined place value, up by 1. If this number is less than 5, then you are going to keep your hundredths place the same and cross out your remaining place values. So since our thousandths place is 5 or greater, we need to round our 5 up to a value of 6 and then cross off our remaining place values. This gives us a rounded value of 3 and 26 hundredths. Now it's really important to remember that we rounded to the hundredths place. And since we rounded to the hundredths place, that means that our rounded value should end on the hundredths place, and we should not have any numbers past the hundredths place. Let's walk through a few practice problems together. Can you round 2 and 457 thousandths to the nearest tenths place? Well, let's walk through this together. Our first step is to underline the place value that we need to round to. Our second step is to look at the number directly to the right of our underlined place value. If this number is 5 or greater, that means we have to round our underlined place value up by 1. And since 5 is 5 or greater, we need to round our 4 up to a 5 and cross out our remaining place values. That means that our rounded value is 2 and 5 tenths. And remember, we were rounding to the tenths place, which means our value had to end on the tenths place. Let's go ahead and try another one together. We are going to round 4 and 803 thousandths to the nearest tenths place. So remember, our first step is to underline the place value that we're rounding to. Our second step is to look at the number directly to the right of our underlined place value. Then we look and see if this number is 5 or greater. Since 0 is less than 5, we keep our tenths place the same and cross out our remaining place values. So we have rounded 4 and 803 thousandths to the nearest tenths place, which gives us a value of 4 and 8 tenths. And again, since we're rounding to the tenths place, we had to end on the tenths place. Let's go ahead and try one last problem together. This time, we're not going to be using our chart. You are going to have to identify the different place values. I want you to round 9 and 168 thousandths to the nearest hundredths place. Alright, our first step is to underline our place value that we're rounding to. So we need to look for our hundredths place. Well, we have our decimal, so we have our tenths place, and then our hundredths place. So I'm going to underline the hundredths place. My second step is to look at the number directly to the right of my underlined place value. Since 8 is 5 or greater, I'm going to round my 6 up to a 7 and cross out my remaining place values. That means that my rounded value is 9 and 17 hundredths. And again, Since we were rounding to the hundredths place, we made sure that we ended our rounded number on the hundredths place. Let's review what we've learned in today's lesson. When you're rounding decimals, it's very important that you remember the different place values. This is because you're going to be asked to round to a specific place value, so you need to know where you're rounding. Let's use our example of 8 and 901 thousandths. We're going to round this to the tenths place. So our first step is to underline the tenths place. Our second step is to look at the number directly to the right of our underlined place value. If this number is 5 or greater, we're going to round our underlined place value up by 1 and cross out the remaining place values. Since 0 is less than 5, we're going to keep our underlined value the same and cross out our remaining place values. That means that 8 and 901 thousandths rounded to the nearest tenths place has a value of 8 and 9 tenths. And remember, since we're rounding to the tenths place, our final rounded number must end on the tenths place.